Hello, everybody, and welcome to Instrumental Breakthroughs. I'm your host, Daniel Shankin. Instrumental Breakthroughs is a look at the psychedelic origin stories of your favorite creative superheroes. It's a project of Mount Tam Psychedelic Integration, which offers community for people who are exploring their consciousness, growing, healing, and evolving. Williams is a literary writer and psychedelic explorer and the author of The Wild Kindness, a Psilocybin Odyssey. It's a memoir about growing mushrooms in the high desert of New Mexico. Her other works include The Wrestling Party, which I wasn't invited to, by the way, and Girl Walking Backwards, which was named one of the best young adult queer novels by Vogue Magazine. She has written for several publications, including DoubleBlind, Out Magazine, Flaunt, Lucid News, and Lenny Letter. Welcome, Bett.
Thank you. It's really great to get to hang with you again. I've missed you.
Oh, well, I'm a meme away on Instagram.
It's true.
But yeah, it's good. It's good to be sharing space.
Best memes ever. Best psychedelic memes ever. You outdid Psychedelic Milk. Remember Psychedelic Milk? He's not there anymore on the Instagrams. He had some good ones.
He took a weird turn.
He did. Yeah. Is he okay?
He got kind of like all QAnon'd out.
Yeah, and I think he started to be like, I'm doing too many drugs, which might have been true.
Right. I mean, if you think it, it probably is.
Yeah.
People don't think that they're doing too many. So did that ever happen?
There's so many articles that I got into and realized, gosh, I don't have the whole story on this one. I do remember that. Psychedelic humor is so important, and it was kind of like I just think of that era being of ridiculous humor, because I mean, how many trips have you come away from where you have like one sentence that just is so hilarious and it sort of vibrates with a resonance, like in my books. I think Beth told me something about like, you know, going from being a small fry to a medium fry, and something like that can just like take you to like God and back. A good joke.
Yeah, I mean, I remember this one time where I was sitting with a friend and we looked at each other and just started laughing.
Yeah.
You know, just losing it. And then I looked back at them and they looked all proud as if they had actually told a joke that was good. And I was like, you didn't tell a joke. Like, you didn't do anything. Like, you didn't tell a good joke. You didn't say anything wise or anything. We just looked at each other and laughed. And then we laughed again for another 5 minutes.
That's like masterful to not even need the tool of the joke to accomplish it.
Right.
Good job.
Yeah. And so where do you think the humor went? Like, what is with this such seriousness is abounds everywhere?
Yeah, I think it's because you go through this, like the pandemic brain that I'm dealing with right now has gone on so long without the usual like beats and signals and intuitive rhythms that I'm used to, that I think I'm having a freak out. And that's where you go like, wait a minute, I can't just laugh through this. Like, this is actually really, really scary. So I think I definitely kind of, you get real serious going like, wait a minute, something's wrong. Something's wrong. So that reminds me that, you know, maybe if you can let go into that and let the jokes continue even more, like, are you willing to let it be funny even when it is actually getting really serious? That's a challenge.
Right. I mean, that humor, I think, certainly builds resilience.
Yeah.
You know, gives us a fighting chance, to face the darkness. Now,
like last year, I kept saying to Beth, like, remember that year we had to stay home? And that was last year, and we were joking. And now it's actually kind of occurred, and, you know, depending on your lifestyle. I live in the boonies, so I don't have a lot of reasons to go out. I've gone on a few little road trips, but yeah, I'm in the point of the trip where it's like, wait a minute, this is serious. And then I'm like, I'm actually in a state of like this like confusion over like, what is my strategy? it's probably always going to get a little bit off rhythm if you start to get freaked out and scared. But that's part of it, right? Like the freak out and the getting scared, isn't that like part of the recalibration?
Well, I think it's really nice to, one of my favorite things about freaking out and getting scared, getting absolutely maddeningly terrified, is that it's temporary.
Yeah.
You know, in those cases. And then like the next morning, you know, some of my best integration circles were held at Denny's.
Yes.
you know, like whenever we were able to drive
That's so
again,
necessary. You know? Just the word Denny's and the smell and like, talking about psychedelics where you're near bacon. Oh, Beth just sent me a note. She said her LSD joke was, you're a home fry because you're at home.
You have to sing it.
But you have to sing it.
You're a home fry.
You're a home fry. Because you're at home.
That's what your brain is now. You're home fried.
Yeah, you're home fried.
See, you're home fried.
Yeah.
Please tell Beth that's hilarious. tell her I'm like I'm rolling on the floor laughing.
You would if you were really high.
But I know. But the thing about it, so we're sitting at Denny's and you were just horrified, right? You were just terror.
Yeah.
You just like faced terror, like boundless terror. And then you made it. And it's just sort of like, you know, you might not even have anything to say except like, whew.
Yeah.
And that gives us the sense that we can handle, if we can handle that, we can handle anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think what I've been seeing with friends ever since like February or like back in January, December is like people hitting their freak out, like really going like, oh, wait a minute, I don't know how to handle this. And like all the strategies have collapsed. And I'm talking like, like it's not even about the pragmatics of being in a pandemic as much as just the psychological coping, watching people just crash. And that happened to me right before the conjunction. It was like this, it felt biological. It just felt like my brain was so exhausted from integrating and figuring out what was going on and realizing I'd failed, that all the information I'm getting is just from a screen and there's not enough to like navigate. Right. So it was a kind of collapse. And then I found myself doing the craziest stuff, like relying on old archangel lore that friends had passed to me. I'm not an archangel person. That's not my tradition. That's like Blavatsky bullshit. But I was like, Saint Germain and Saint Michael's, they're going on my altar right now in the form of like blue and purple light. And it was interesting to watch, you know, when you're really in a pinch, like who do you call on? Like, are these people who are like atheists being like, Jesus, excuse me, Jesus.
Well, I mean, I guess I have that. I'm lucky in that my integration manual was Be Here Now. Yeah. And so, you know, I ended up kind of squarely in the lap of like Neem Karoli Baba. And like that's who I've always gone to. You know, I wasn't a staunch atheist. And that seems to help. And, you know, he seems to put up with a lot of my nonsense as best he can. But so the idea of like, you know, to what extent do we need strategies, and to what extent do we kind of like, do we need to like surrender all of them?
Because I feel when the strategies fall apart and you're in that nakedness, you can feel the lie when you're pulling together a semblance of a strategy, especially when one is speaking, you know, like there's that sense of, oh, I'm bullshitting right now because that worked last week, but now it's not working. Like, you know, I think one of the things the psychedelic community was dealing with was like the fact that Jake Angeli was a mushroom person was sort of like the last entertaining contemplative hurrah, you know, that it was interesting, you know, and it brought up ideas of, you know, where do you stand in terms of using stuff that like where's quack shamanism and taking conspiracy, where does all that lie in your life? And I've sort of rely on Eric Davis to help with that that thought process. And
Mhm.
I'm all into it. I'm realizing like the imagination is really important. Like we're not getting the stimulation we need that lights up our hearts and the insides of our mind. And so I think part of my homeopathic counteractive medicine for dangerous conspiracies is to make up an ethical fiction that you can just step inside, as it, because I'm a writer and a creative person. And I think the idea that we have to live in this, that everything has to be truthful all the time is good in the public sphere, but in the mind and the imagination, we are really in need of vitality and life force. And however we get that is like fine by me at this point.
Right. Well, can you give me an example of ethical fiction?
Ethical, yeah. Let's see. There's some things on the land here that Beth and I have seen that are like weird white tendrily elementals, and we've seen them when we're high, and we've seen them when we're in a sober state as well. And so it's about just acknowledging that there's like an ancient elemental being that lives here, and just going like, okay, we're just gonna be, that's part of the lore now. We don't need to prove it. We don't need to say what it is, but it now exists as part of our life. So it's like feeding those folk tale mythologies of daily life.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, I'm perfectly comfortable with saying that it's my own ethical fiction, that there's a little old Indian man wrapped in a plaid blanket who died 20, 30 years ago, who's looking out for me.
Yes.
And if I chant the mantras that he likes, that will make him happy and I'll have better luck.
Yes.
And if I follow his teachings, which are to tell the truth and love everybody, then I will have better luck.
I feel the resonance of that. Yeah. And I think it's very...
You can use it anytime you want.
Yeah. And I had an idea I wanted to pitch to a magazine, and it was rejected because there's like a resurgence. My book club, we're discussing Octavia Butler's book Dawn, which is about alien sex and about these agender creatures called uloi that are parasitical and help the aliens and the humans like hook up. And so one of my like pet fascinations is succubi and interdimensional erotic dalliances and such, and so my article was rejected, but then I saw Vice published an article on like sex with ghosts and interdimensional traditions of erotic dalliances, and these are I think it's funny, and one, because I think it also is people are doing it more because of a pandemic, but also it's an example of like a necessary ethical fiction that touches upon incredible loneliness and need to feel alive.
Right. Have I ever told you about the extraterrestrial girlfriend I dated in college?
No.
And mind you, I was very high through all of this. These are the acid days. But yeah, and I was starting to, starting to dabble in mysticism and things like that. And, the ideas of both, succubuses and dakinis and all of these sorts of things, and that energy seemed to be around.
Yeah.
And maybe a Jungian would just say it was my anima, but whatever.
You were a young man.
Yeah. I was a young man with a lot of energy and a head full of acid. And so I had I had a non-corporeal girlfriend who would sometimes jump into the bodies of girls I would meet at parties or bars.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Go further. Tell me more.
And I could just sort of tell that it was like, oh, it's you.
Yes.
And it was kind of like, on one hand, I would sort of have to introduce myself to this woman because we didn't know each other. Be like, hey, I'm Dan. But at the other hand, like the look in the eyes, what I was projecting is that like, oh yeah, it's you. We know each other. We're doing, it's like we found each other again. And
you want to tell the woman, like, by the way, you are being, mounted by the alien who also likes me.
No, I knew enough not to say that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it
Mine's a
just, I
mermaid.
might
I
have said,
think mermaids are constantly fucking with me and hopping into people's bodies and stuff.
mm.
Yeah, there's like high
Well,
level
it's
mermaids
good if you
and
want
freaky
legs.
ones. Yeah, yeah, they don't have legs.
Let me just borrow these for a minute.
Yeah, I know. And then like the Syrian roux that I talk about in the book was used by the Mongolian Hunzu people for these erotic dalliances with the interdimensional fairies and things. Um,
Mm.
you know, everybody of all cultures has these just really out there beliefs, and you know, when you live in America where everybody went QAnon, it takes the fun out of exploring the fictions.
Yes. Right. Well, so that's true. And then also, I've sort of, I govern myself kind of carefully
Mm-hmm.
because I've seen my own personal proclivity for going too far too fast. You
Yeah.
know, like I can take a rabbit hole like nobody's business. And, you know, at some point I just have to say, what does this have to do with anything?
Yes. Yes. And I think, don't you think the rabbit holes are are they an initiation of sorts? Like for instance, I had a rabbit hole where I'd always really loved Daryl Hannah. I went on a
Because
bike
she's a
ride.
mermaid
She's a mermaid, yeah.
when
And
she's not a cave woman.
oh gosh, that film is a fine, fine film. Clan of the Cave Bear. I was on a bike ride to raise money for like the LA River Walk or something, and I'm on this messed up $75 bike that's squeaking, and I'm in my cowboy boots, and Daryl Hannah, the actual Daryl Hannah, comes behind me and goes squeak, 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 and starts making fun of my bike. And so we start talking, and she rides with me for an hour, and we start talking about George. We had both a shared fetish for the trajectory of oil in culture, and both agreed that the figure of George Patton was an intense catalyst for oil culture and rock and roll. So we start just going off on like what felt like a very basic, like autistic tear. And then I called the magazine I was working for because I wanted to write about the biodiesel activism she was doing with Willie Nelson, and it involved Splash getting caught in my VCR. And so I watched it like 4 times. And then everywhere I went, people were talking about mermaids. I'd be in line to get a bagel and somebody'd be like, I had a dream about 5 mermaids. And this lasted for 2 months. I was sent to go cover her biodiesel activism. I met her, all this stuff happened. So these rabbit holes are, but it came to nothing. So yeah, I think they're initiations of like riding on the wave of it. But boy, it's fun. You feel
Like, well, I think it's sort of like the Jupiter return kind of thing. Like thing at some point, if you're tinkering around with your mind, you sort of like crack it open in a certain way and things get really, really big. And the possibility, you know, you recognize so many of the things that you have been believing all of this time are untrue and arbitrarily chosen.
Yeah.
And so it's like the kind of, was it Hakeem Bey who said everything is true, nothing is true, everything is permitted.
Yeah.
And so you're like in that space, and if there's not some sort of ethics, right? You said you called the
ethical
fictions ethical.
Yeah.
If there's not some sort of ethical ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which if you look at like wisdom traditions from India and Tibet and so on and so forth, like their initiates were grounded in ethics.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were allowed to do advanced practices. Right. So if you kind of set yourself adrift in vast space with no ethical framework, you're just going to like, you know, start howling into the void about the earth is flat.
Yeah, I mean, I could care less during that rabbit hole whether people believed that Daryl Hannah was an important figure or mermaids were important at all. And that probably saved me. What if I was like, I have to bring mermaidness to the world? Yeah, that it and it reminds me of the
it would have
ethics.
been it just would have been a different book.
Totally. The wild kindness splash. Like, but the Shipibo have a story told to me by a Shipibo ayahuasca server who said that each of the initiates cough up a dart at some point in their training that can be used to kill somebody. And the lesson is to not use your dart to kill somebody, because and then you can go on to the next level of your shamanic training. And I think for the ethical fictions and the rabbit holes, part of the training is keep it to yourself. Like don't send your dart may not be for the public. It's there for your lesson and for your training, young grasshopper, because you are just starting out.
In Steve Bayer's book, Steve Bayer? He wrote Singing to the Plants.
Mm-mm.
Great. Mestizo shamanism in the Upper Amazon.
Ooh.
It's great. And he says, he's sitting with his shaman, and he was grumpy with him. The shaman, told him no or something like that. He wasn't allowed to do what he wanted to do. And, he was having a temper tantrum, and he coughed, and a spider flew out of his mouth and attached into the side of the shaman's face and melted into it. And the next day, the shaman's whole family got sick. And, he was running around feeling like he did it.
Yeah.
Like he was feeling it. And he's like, on one hand, that's ridiculous. I know that I can't just have a hallucination where I make somebody's whole family got sick. But on the other hand, maybe I can.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever I've had that happen. And it's a lifelong concern of what is your mind capable of doing? One time I had an ex and we broke up, and she was really, really mean. And my dog died and my mom died, and I had this horrible bleeding fibroid situation that I had to have surgery for, and I'm deeply anemic. So I go horseback riding and I call her and I say, I've had the best day I've had in months and months and months, because I got to ride a horse with my friend. And she said, oh, now you're just going to do everything I do? Because she was a horse person. So I was just, this was back when I took everything so personally. So I held on to that grudge. I held on to that grudge for years. So I'm lying in the bath and I'm on mushrooms and I'm thinking about her horse, and I'm thinking about ancestors I have that were Cherokee, and how in the native culture, you had to steal a horse to have a horse. So I was stealing her horse in my mind, just the energy of it. And I look on her Facebook the next day and her horse died within the 4 hours that I actually was stealing her horse. And so that was a lesson for me. I mean,
right.
and a few other things like that have happened where, I'm not a person who throws intentional witchcraft, but I realize science has discovered that you can get into people's dreams now. Do you know how big a deal that is? That they're
huge.
Statistically, they have found that you can. That's a very disturbing thing. We should all be very both excited though, because I just heard somebody, I think on Sam Harris, who was saying, "Oh well, you can't do anything with your mind." And I'm we're still there.
Right.
And yeah, so I think we just haven't been able to think about. The problem with science is that it's not alchemical. It's always one thing acting upon another. And there's always at least many things acting upon things at any given time. And the fact our basic scientific method can't take into account some basic precepts of alchemy is why we're at where we're at, right?
Yeah. Interdependent co-origination.
Yes. That.
Every effect has so many causes.
Yeah.
The only reason we're able to even sit here is because somebody invented chairs. Right. And that's almost the least important thing, so many things conspired for us to be able to do this.
Yeah. And that's
And
where I'm at too with a lot of the testing of psychedelics and mushrooms and things like that. It's like with the scientific method that we currently have, we're just not going to get there fast enough because
mhm,
we don't have the, I don't think we want to have the complexity, because then you wouldn't have the amount of students paying money to go to school and
mhm.
dealing with these scientists who tell them that they're smart, because there's only a few people who can really wrap their heads around some of these concepts that are necessary to get us to the next step.
Right. Well, it just makes me think, with the scientific method. So back to Neem Karoli Baba, right? Said it's better to see God in everything than it is to try and figure it out. Because it's like, oh, did we lose our connection?
Yeah.
You there? Hello?
I hear you,
Oh,
but Stephen, but Steve on. He's back. Oh, I have to move into a better Wi-Fi space.
okay.
Am I back?
So you're back.
Better.
So it was kind of like, it's,
Okay, cool.
there's all of these things constantly at play that we sort of, that we can never know.
Yeah.
You can't really know like all of the things that are in play that make things happen. However, I can be grateful that this moment's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the only way I've been able to ride this current wave of not knowing is realizing that having to wrap concepts around it for the entire year has been a neurotic response. So
Mhm.
I'm getting into the yoga of it, and I need a little bit of discipline with some practices that I think will help,
Mm.
that
Do you know
include
what practices?
physical
will
strengthening.
help?
I think for me, it's like,
Mm.
I'm not a yoga practitioner, but
Mhm.
starting might be a good idea, but mostly just massive, like walking in nature is what
Right.
is going to be necessary.
Sure, sure. So, it's interesting because Daryl Hannah was recently in that movie or that TV series, like that psychedelic, that pansexual,
Oh, Sense
drug-fueled
8.
Yes.
Yes. I know. She seems very psychedelic. I mean, when she got together with Neil Young, I called it the Harvest Moon Mermaid Attack.
Okay.
That's a pretty, I mean, they both, I think they got together because they go up to like Pine Ridge and stuff, and they do a lot of ceremony and a lot of activism together.
Mhm.
But then I saw the movie that they made together, and I realized, like, you got to be really careful with like how many drugs you take, and then you fall in love and you think you're supposed to like make something together. Man, that movie was hard. What was the name of that movie, Beth? The one, it was like a musical, and it was about how these like tribe of white guys and this tribe of like white hippies, the men were going to bring the seed to the women during the full moon, and it was this mystical thing, and it was like I could see that their intention, but it was like, okay, next time I get a really big idea, I'm going to run it through a few it's called Paradox, run it through a few editing systems.
Right, because like even kings, kings knew to have fools and advisors. It's like, and the advisors would sometimes be political and not say what they meant, but like the fools, kind of had free range to be like, that's a dumb idea. You're calling me a fool, but you want to make a movie with Daryl Hannah. Like, that's stupid.
I would make a movie with Daryl Hannah in a heartbeat, even though I thought Paradox was like really bad.
Sure. Yeah, me too. But she's not, my phone's not ringing.
Totally.
Well, that's
but she said there's certain people that are psychedelic. Like Daryl Hannah is psychedelic, and who's really vibrating on a psychedelic energy level right now is the Britney Spears thing. Like, she made a video playing with her kinetic sand, and I have no idea if she's really trapped or what's going on with all that, but it's a very psychedelic situation.
Well, anytime somebody is fighting, anytime people are fighting for cognitive liberty
Yeah.
and, the right to be strange and not be stigmatized and abused
Yeah.
for it. I mean, that's in the realm of mind manifesting.
Yes. And having been recently asked to write about something at a time when I'm feeling like I'm collapsing and rebuilding new ideas, the only word that really came to mind was talent. Like, there's such a thing as like having a talent for psychedelics, and then there's any talent that you have can be viewed psychedelically. And it all came about when thinking about that Maria Sabina was different from other Mazatec practitioners, and we have a tendency to romanticize, a figure like her. So I wanted to know, like, what exactly was it? And it was simply that she was more musical. Like, she would take words and break them into beats, and it was like, oh, that's a talent. And in terms of shamanism, oftentimes what makes somebody a good healer is not so much training as their talent being brought forth through discipline. And we don't like to talk about talent right now because we want to be able to have a school where people can go learn these things and pay money and be told, like, oh yeah, you are now qualified to work with people with psychedelics. And it's like, yeah, that's great, because not everybody's got the talent to do it. It feels taboo.
I got in trouble once. I was teaching a yoga teacher training at this yoga studio, and I refused to give one of the women her certificate. And, the owner of the studio was like, but she paid for it. And I was like, yeah, but she didn't do any of the work.
Yeah.
Her final teaching was like, all she had to do was teach 3 poses in a yin style, and she couldn't do it. And the thing is, it's not that she couldn't. I have every belief that she could have. Her ego was in the way. She wanted to teach what she wanted to teach. She wanted to show off. I was like, that's not what this is about. You should just show me you could do the stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, show me you can do the stuff means something. If you're going to be holding space for somebody on X amount of Y.
Yes. Yeah, I've seen that in places where I've taught as well. This incredible pressure to not say you can't pass the class because you paid for it. Yeah. Where do you see the word talent kind of enacting itself upon the world of the psychedelic? I mean, the psychedelic has always brought out people's drawing skills, their musical skills. It brings out these innate things in already talented people. But I imagine it will do so in a therapeutic setting as well.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the big problems with psychedelics is then all of a sudden you got to buy a whole bunch of $400 worth of art supplies.
Totally. And a van.
And a van. I'm desperate for a van.
Yeah.
So I like that you, on one hand, linked it to discipline.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you linked it to the idea that that there's something innate, that something is being brought forth that's innate. And I think that it's nice that we're so varied, that people are so varied, and that, what it looks like for you to kind of follow your passion, to be disciplined about something that you cultivate a skill, right? Because it's one thing to have talent, and then it's another thing to cultivate a skill.
Yeah.
Right. And this is, a big part of my integration work where I'm coaching people and they're like, I'm going to open up a center. And I'm like, do you know how to run a center? It's like, do you know how to schedule a class or book a training or, make a bed or pick out affordable linens? Like, what do you know about running a center?
Right. You like people and want them
Yeah.
around all the time, every day.
Yeah. All this kind of stuff. And it's just sort of like, I remember, yeah, there was, that the sometimes the rage is people want to be glass blowers, because it's fun and you can smoke pot out of the stuff you make and you can always sell your stuff. And, I had to tell one of my friends once, because he had a vision that he was a glass blower now. And he wanted me to buy like this crappy little pipe. I'm like, bro, I'll buy a pipe from you in 3 years.
Yeah.
I was like, keep practicing. I was like, don't expect, we can't expect the world. The world is full of critical feedback. Right.
Yeah.
And we can't expect the world to just bow down to our visions if we don't put the work in to
I'm
cultivate
seeing
the skill.
that a lot, like people going like, I just stepped out the door, I'm ready. Where is everybody? Tom Lane helped me a lot in this inquiry by saying something that blew my mind regarding Maria Sabina's talent. He said, it's not just enough to have the talent. The entheogen needs to choose you. It needs to say, you are the one, and enter into a collaboration. So I think that applies to musical talent, artistic talent as well. Like, you may have a musical talent, but there's a sense I get that the thing needs to choose you too. Like the retreat center idea needs to choose you. You want it, but it needs to choose you back, which is a wild way to think about it, because what are you talking about in terms of that thing picking you? But that was a bit of a missing link in terms of thinking of talent.
Well, and also, so just because you are chosen doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
Yeah.
Like, there still has to be some quality. There's so many people who, got knocked down 6 times and then didn't get up 7.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that I like to think that that's one of my talents, is I get up.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm particularly smart or particularly whatever, but I keep getting I keep getting back up. And that's kind
well,
of
I think
the thing
that's
that we're
the being
saying
chosen. Like, you have to. Yeah.
Right.
You have to do it, and you have to learn the skills. You have to learn how to make the bed. You have to learn to like actually play that chord progression. And once that is established, that you are in service to your talent, by that sense of being chosen, you're going to get up because you have no other choice.
Yeah. So
like that, with the book, it was kind of like that. Like, I remember right before I finally had the last 4 months of finishing it, it was like, the book was like, it's not going to finish itself. You have to, it was like the biggest bitch slap. Like, you just have to do this right now. And so having that relationship, I guess if anyone who's read my book, my relationship with the mushrooms is like that. It's very call and response. I must have created a call, I think I've manufactured through my imagination a very call and response with my higher self. The othering, I think that Terrence McKenna talks about the othering voice of the mushrooms, and I think they work that way for me. But I think I've made the world a bit of that relationship as part of my my phone call to my higher self or something.
Is that you hear that you're called to things?
Yeah, or I'll
That's how you experience it.
anthropomorphize the entire, I'll anthropomorphize or animism, like make everything a thing that can say, hey, Bett. Yeah, so that's an aspect of ethical fiction to, lay
Right.
upon the world. I give you permission, hawk in the sky, to like tell me something today, or just driving along a highway, seeing people. And I think that's why I feel so lost, is that the world has shifted so much that my mirroring relationship with this animated world is not what it was, and I need to recalibrate.
Right.
For a more micro experience. But spring is coming, so that's going to change.
Yeah. I mean, all of a sudden it's just making me feel like I should send you random pictures on Instagram.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Like, this is your tarot card of the day. It's
Yeah.
There's actually something in the mail for you that's pretty random.
Oh, cool. Yay. Yeah, randomness is so important. There's computer programs that you can put on your phone that will lead you to a random place. Like people will purchase this and they'll look it up and they'll walk or drive to a place that they would never go to. And I completely relate.
Have you ever done geocaching?
No. What is that?
Well, it's so basically people hide these little things like around, sometimes in the woods, sometimes in the city, and then you log it on this app.
Oh, cool.
And then like other people you go searching for it. And so I found some in the woods.
Oh, I'm so down for that.
Yeah, I did. This was 15 years ago. I think I got into it for 6 months or something. And some of them are like time capsules. And it's like, you get it's like, one of those like army boxes, metal army ammo cases. And it's like a time capsule in there. And then I found ones that are like little tiny magnet things that are like stuck to the back of signs. And then unscrew. And there's like a little piece of paper that says you found it.
That's so amazing. That's the could the psychedelic community like do it with, can you do it with like a group of people that you might want to get to know better, or is it only one source of this?
It's like the hash in the library.
Yeah. Beth is like, it's like the person who hid hash for us in the library.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I don't know the technology behind it that well.
Yeah.
I just know that it's worldwide. Like, it's like, I moved to this new town and it's entirely possible that they're around. There could be one on my street. I would never know. And we've lost Bett again. That's a big
game, especially as we're, still pushing through COVID time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, let's see.
Right, because you get to interact with people, but you don't have to touch them.
Yeah, no, my Wi-Fi is still strong. Yeah. Am I back?
You're frozen for me. Let's see what it looks like on Facebook.
Oh.
Looks like we're both frozen on Facebook, maybe. No, it's just me. All right, so while Bett is working on getting back, I'm just going to plug her book. It's called The Wild Kindness. It's Psilocybin Odyssey. Bett's writing has brains, charisma, beauty, and wit. It's the cover art, I believe, is made by the same person who did what is Duncan Trussell's cartoon, and it's
Mike Perry, Broad City. No,
and then was
Mike
that the
Perry.
same person?
No, it's the guy Mike Perry who did Broad City.
Oh, got it. Okay, I don't even know what Broad City is.
Yeah, Mike Perry is a New York street mural guy, and he did Broad City's Two Chicks, and there's a scene where they have a mushroom trip, and there's a lot of animation in it when he did that.
What are some of your favorite depictions of psychedelic use in culture, of mushroom use?
I find mushroom depictions cringe-inducing a little bit. Yeah, it's sort of like sex scenes in movies often. It's the thing that bugs me about depictions is that it's always, we haven't gotten beyond the like, oh my God, it was so crazy. I can't believe I did that. Like I would like to see a boring mushroom trip or something. And also I think the one-dimensional cartoons are great. I think Duncan Trussell's cartoons in Midnight Gospel are really wonderful, but they're very violent. And they definitely do not represent my experience, but I do get a psychedelic feeling watching them. And I can respect that as a good, accurate representation of the constant, endless movement and things eating each other, kind of like how, your cells in your body are always dying. And being reborn. So that's probably my favorite. But I'm always looking for the psychedelic and other things, because I think we need to evolve to what's the psychedelic for now. Like, for instance, we have here in Santa Fe something called Meow Wolf, which is like a giant corporate art installation kind of amusement park. And it sort of takes the idea of the psychedelic and freezes it in time, and in a sense kills it, because there is no movement, there is no becoming. So anything that is in the process of like becoming something else to me is psychedelic. And there's little moments and glimmers of that I see, and I'm waiting. We're aesthetically, we are failing a little bit in the project of creating what is the new psychedelic. Like, we get stuck in these tropes, we get stuck in the pastel colors, we get stuck in the like little diamonds, drawn over, the natural hillside. The film Nomadland is, in my mind, a psychedelic film, because it's completely innovative in terms of how it works with actors, completely innovative in the time it takes with a frame, following an actor or a long shot. It's like, oh, I have never seen this before. And the emotional resonance is so heavy that something so simple can just hit you and you start crying. Like, so I would say that's an example of something psychedelic. Like this actress, Aaliyah Shawkat, what's the name of her? Search Party. She's an actress who embodies the psychedelic to me, because she just never stops flickering and moving. She's got an intelligence that you just don't see in television space, and you don't know why it feels so smart. And it's just, in constant movement. So I think it's time for like a little bit of body work on the aesthetics of the psychedelic realm. Right. And it's something not acknowledged by the psychedelic community, that Aldous Huxley, when he wrote Doors of Perception, was operating as a philosopher of aesthetics, like telling us, like, this is how we should see, look for what is resonant.
And he was just looking for mirrors.
Yeah.
He was looking at these quiet, delicate, Northern European, portraits.
He was looking at Cezanne and Botticelli and stuff, because like his project as a modernist was, to say like, we've created all this dead art because we went through the Enlightenment, and it's time to find out where the life is. And I think that's been the psychedelic project as cultural figures, is like, where's the life in this piece of art? Where's the life in this music? And we don't really, we've left, like, there's a guy who, his name is Boretta, who
he's going to be at the next event.
And he's pretty out. Yeah. And what he's doing with music, it's like, be more of that kind of conversation coming into our psyches or our bodies. We're here to make culture, and like, it's looking like ugly right now. The New York City ball drop for New Year's was like the ugliest thing I've ever seen. And also our current administration, the aesthetics and the colors and the way like everything is filmed. It's like, we need help. Psychedelic people did that in the 60s. Like, we brought Huxley forward, and we had the Rolling Stones, and we had, the entire field of our visual auditory realm transformed by psychedelics. And now psychedelics are back. And so where's this transformation? We need to look better. We need to sound better. Things need to be more beautiful.
Now, I feel like different entheogens have different aesthetics. And so perhaps there's some of that at play. There's really, as far as Meow Wolf goes, I run these integration circles every Wednesday. If you're listening at home, you're welcome to join if you go to the website. And there's a lot of people who are talking about doing therapy, and they're, psychedelic therapy. And there's some people who are, have the spiritual or ceremonial approach. And, one guy says, he was like, I know these medicines are sacred, but Meow Wolf just opened in Las Vegas. You know, he lives in Nevada, and me and my friends are going to eat some acid, go to Meow Wolf, and I'm really excited
Yeah.
about it. And everybody, you know, we sort of like the room was quiet for a minute, and then everybody was like, "Yay!" It just
Yeah.
kind of took a minute to kind of step out of like the work ethic of it all,
Yeah.
you know,
Beth
to
and
be
I
able
took
to
massive
enjoy.
amounts of mushrooms when Meow Wolf opened here. And it was really necessary because it's so hard to be around something so psychedelic when you're not on the substance.
Mhm.
It helped, but yeah. But I think we need to do that more. Like I had to do an outline for a project, and I did LSD to help me do the outline, to think about it. And scientists who have, well, who was it who figured out the DNA structure? I think that may have been debunked that it
Crick?
was on LSD, perhaps. Somebody was like, there's a little not true about that. But I know that a lot of people work in engineering and science will use entheogens to help them with their, projects.
Right.
Yeah, so I definitely can tell that the Meow Wolf in Las Vegas is an LSD aesthetic, but it's an LSD aesthetic from the Warhol era. It's all about taking pop culture products to sell. And so Beth and I will probably go there, take a bunch of LSD, and see if it holds up. I think it's a little dated, that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and visual art.
See, and that's what's missing in our world also is the psychedelic quality control.
Uh-huh.
Like, does this hold up?
Yeah. Yeah, just because it's psychedelic doesn't mean it can't be like dated and stuck. And because definitely there's no doubt that Meow Wolf is interested in the psychedelic aesthetic. But yeah, because the ayahuasca aesthetic is very specific, I think. The ayahuasca has a dark background with like neon, a lot of like colors coming through a darker background. Do you find that to be true? I don't know if that's true with DMT. I've never done it, but I know
DMT
that when
is just sort of like everything all at once.
Yeah. So I definitely am seeing a lot of DMT aesthetics coming through. Yeah, so we have battling aesthetics. No wonder we're confused about what we're going to bring forth, because not all psychedelics bring forth bright colors. Culturally, there's somebody wrote an article that bright colors were really put down in terms of the Victorian era because they were considered like from indigenous peoples, so it's much more like the beige, and so now we have like a pastel psychedelia that like lets in colors to an extent, and so it's kind of a balance between the two. Yeah, we need to work that out. We need the artists to step up.
And we were talking a lot about humor and silliness, and it's like I sort of feel like LSD is the silliest.
Yeah.
It's like ayahuasca is maybe not so much.
Oh my gosh, the last time I did LSD, I fixated on a phrase that came to me that was cat carpaccio, and I just kept seeing a cat like sliced very thinly. And I couldn't shake it. It was very funny to me, and also just very disassociated of cat carpaccio. And I don't know if that would come up so much. It might come up in mushrooms.
Right.
But the thing is that those things are actually important, like plays on words. The artist Richard Prince has done a series of jokes and plays on words. Like it does something to the brain and it's teaching us something about language. Like when you see two words that just kind of make you pause and go, that's weird. That's actually teaching us something about correct placement of things or lack thereof.
Yeah, Wavy Gravy was a master of that.
Wavy Gravy, yeah.
He was really into play on words, and he would, I'm trying to think of some of his, but he would, and the thing that was really nice about them is that they were also good natured.
Yes.
Like he would flip things on their head in such a way that, you were sort of welcomed.
Yeah.
It wasn't, he wasn't getting one over on you. He wasn't trying to necessarily prove that he was clever. He was sort of inviting you into a world where your ordinary perceptions were freed so that you could be more of who you were, or like,
Yeah.
more at play.
Yeah.
He as a, like, nobody for president. Who cares about the poor? Nobody.
Nobody. Yes.
Who's going to stop the
And
wars?
Leary
Nobody.
was great at that too. Leary was a master
Mm-hmm.
with language, of just playing with stuff. I think it's really important to use art and language right now to counter the fact that it's been a necessity of late to say that these things are sacred and that people do them in quote unquote ceremony. But I'm having people
Mm-hmm.
come to me saying, yeah, you do these things in a really sacred way, and you do ceremony and stuff. And I'm trying to do that more. And I look at them and I think like, oh, I don't want to lay a trip on how you've been doing your medicines and such, because I think those words can be very clouding and really, they're very colonizing. When you say
Mm-hmm.
something spiritual, you're actually separating, you're taking the spirituality out of everyday things by saying
Mm-hmm.
something else is more spiritual. Cricket, here.
I've never been to a Grateful Dead show that wasn't a ceremony. Oh, I lost her again. So I'll say that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never been to a Grateful Dead show and taken
I think,
psychedelics and not. You back? Is the Wi-Fi just chasing you around the house, huh?
Well, I was, when I lost you last time, I was right up next to the modem. And this time I'm back. Am I back?
Yes.
It says I've got full Wi-Fi. Okay, cool. Yeah. But yeah,
So,
but I feel like if you tell people like that there's a sacred way to do things, people having those holy experiences, whether do it in their dorm room or at home, I don't language to mess with that. And I think the cleverness of play on words and art that happened in Leary's era was a way of trying to communicate that. I haven't there's a group that came out of the 60s and 70s and headed in Burning Man, and it was this idea that nothing has any meaning. Like it's kind of like the clowns that come to a festival and they're just like worms in your hair, because like there is no grounding point, purpose, and that not really.
We lost Bett again. Oh man, I guess this is the trouble with sometimes podcasting out of the high desert of New Mexico. I'm going to read a random portion out of her book, I think, just for a moment. Oh, Diana Slattery. She talks about Diana Slattery in here. We've been talking about a lot, like about language, and Diana Slattery kind of takes this one step deeper, and she talks about xenolinguistics and the idea of, what happens, what's the experience of being in an altered state and seeing language that seemingly comes from a different dimension, different world. And so, xenolinguistics, probably one of the most famous xenolinguistic artists are Alison Gray, right? And you've probably seen, Alex and Alison Gray's art, where Alison paints what she calls the secret language. And so it's her visionary language, and she paints it to the great delight of all who see it. While you were away, I opened up randomly to your Diana Slattery page.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah. Alison Gray, didn't she do something with Syrian Rue where she painted her body with the Rue as a dye? I think that might be somebody else. I'm not sure, but the alien languages are a great way of the way art and image will communicate the resonance of something.
Mm-hmm.
But
Do you do any of
yeah.
that? Do you do
Oh,
any
right,
alien language?
I see the hieroglyphics a lot, but I haven't transcribed them. As I said in the Wild Kindness, Slattery's project scared me a little because it took her like 15 years to download these glyphs and make meaning out of them. And they do actually add up to a fully formed, balanced language system. But like, what if you work 15 years on, like, what do you do with that? So next time I see the hieroglyphics, I think I'll start by maybe writing a bit of a drawing.
Right.
I'm
Well,
just
did you
in
read her
general a
book
little
about
bit
it?
scared of aliens. I read her book like cover to cover about 3 times. It's a very, very good book.
No, was it the fiction one
yeah.
or the nonfiction one?
The nonfiction. Does she have a fiction book?
She wrote a fiction book about a future dystopia where nobody ages or dies, except these people that play a game where they run through a maze that's made of the glyphs. And if you win
Ooh.
the game, then you
Wow.
die. And it's kind of a celebration of mortality in a world where everybody is immortal and bored to tears. It's
Yep, she's
it's
doing the work.
really,
She always has.
it's far,
Yeah.
it's hard to read. It's emotionally difficult to read.
Yeah, man. But that's part of the concern, I think, of when you go down a rabbit hole and you really see something truthful, like that book feels very truthful.
Mm-hmm.
I think deep psychedelic insight, you have an audience that may or may not get you. It's one thing to just come up with an idea on your own without psychedelics and be like, this is going to work. People are going to respond. But you get those psychedelic downloads and all of a sudden you're like in service to the medicine. You're in service to your highest ideas. And Diana Slattery, she writes entire books about these fairly obscure things. And
Mm-hmm.
I have immense respect, and also it terrifies me to think that I would be given an idea that I have to attend to with such rigor that not everybody's
Right.
going to get.
Right. Yeah, and if you people who are listening are interested, Diana Slattery has a couple of books, and then she also has an oracle, with her glyphs.
Yeah.
And you can download that on your phone. And
Cool.
you can have sort of this fun I Ching reading, kind of a psychedelic I Ching.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know that Terence McKenna was given a download of a different way to work with the I Ching, and you see those systems psychedelically and
Mm-hmm.
similar to my general, like, I'm not ready to see the aliens yet. I'm not ready to be given that particular kind of download yet, where that employs me so thoroughly.
Right. I would it's possible that I've been given like 3 of those and I just don't do it.
Yeah, you're just like, nah.
I just
Yeah.
I well, and it's also it's kind of a source of frustration for me that I'm very good at on one hand, I was bragging earlier about how I get up again, but there's also a million things that I abandon every day.
Yeah.
You do that for a while and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that was kind of not everything does have legs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess the question is, how do you know what has legs and what doesn't have legs?
Yes, that's the resonance that I do think the psychedelic experience does help with. It goes like, oh, I'm thinking about that, but I'm not feeling the blood in it. Yeah, one of my dreams that I hope I get to enact someday is I'd like to create a caravan that travels from town to town with like vans or maybe just mules with roots music, where you go from town to town and bring your musician friends and you have an outside fire. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that I am always waiting to feel that enough people are interested that I can't do it alone, because I don't want to do something like that alone. It's too much work. or
Mhm.
I'd like to do a psychedelic gathering event. For me right now, it's I need other people interested. That's why
Mhm.
Slattery's work is so intense, is that not only is what she's doing a solitary thing, but she's done like 2-3 books now that are just require her own work. The things that I'm wanting to do require the help of other people. So that's part of it. Like, who's going to hop on, and that's when I'll know it's time to go.
Right. Well, what is the vision? What is the thing to hop onto?
A musical psychedelic music tent revival that goes from town to town. And a what? A convoy. Yeah, convoy. The modern convoy,
Mhm.
where you're just hopping into town, and you're like a tent revival, and you've got a few bands that play outside, and maybe there's a few little groups that gather in a circle to talk about psychedelics or art.
Well,
So
how
it's
is that
not
different?
very,
How is that different from the ones that already happened?
because it's a musical caravan that goes from town to town, so you can actually follow it and drive
Mhm.
to the town and then continue. So it's also a nomad. You can live in your vehicle or camp out type of thing.
I
So
mean, you're
it's
talking
a
about Fish
romance.
Tour.
It's like in a
So wait, it's so you're talking about Fish Tour, basically.
yeah, we're talking about a fish tour that's just like us.
Okay, so what? So your issue is that you want to be able to pick the band.
Yeah, I want to be able to pick the band, or just have it happen organically. Like, that's part of it too. It's like, I don't want to be like the person like scheduling and picking everything. I just want all my friends who know talented musicians to be like, hey, we're going to drive from Flagstaff to Quartzsite, Arizona in a convoy of like vehicles, and
Mhm.
there'll be people who play outside at the RV campsite, and then it's kind of a psychedelic festival. It's kind of a music. One of the things that's happening with regular psychedelic festivals is they're not cultural enough. Like, we're not seeing enough bands. We're not seeing enough visual artists showing up and who are part of the scene. So I'm hoping that, the thing is I have no plans to do this because I haven't gotten the go ahead. I haven't had that thing go,
Right.
it's time. I haven't had the resonance. Like, it hasn't, like the mushrooms were like, you have to write a book. I haven't gotten that green light for this thing
Mhm.
at all. Yeah, how do
So
you
now
know?
we're
Like, you
outside.
put on your you put on your festival. Like, how do you feel the green light when it's time to say, like, it's time, we're gonna do this?
I don't know. In the shower?
The shower, that's where Beth gets all she calls them shower revelations. It's exactly,
Yeah.
I think there's something very special about that. Yeah.
Or sometimes on psychedelics, sometimes in meditation.
Yeah.
You should do a thing. And then again, there's once you get the idea. There's an artist named Zavi, and one of the ways he put it, I liked a lot. He said that there's two of him. He was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he said there's two of him, and there's one guy who comes up with the ideas and has the vision of what the art piece has to look like, and then there's the other guy who's basically just like a mechanic. He's just a laborer, and it's just his job to produce the thing that the other guy thought of.
Yeah. That,
And
partnership helps a lot in that way.
mhm.
To manifest something. That's like, I think partly why Beth and I are such good partners is that we do like doing stuff. So,
Yeah, indeed. Have you been to Symbiosis?
no.
Symbiosis is a really cool event. I hope it happens again. They have acres of live painters
Oh, wow.
in
Acres
front
of
of
painters.
acres of
Yeah.
painters in front of the bands, playing
Huh.
next to the stages. And then they will
Wow.
have these arenas set up.
Mhm.
They built like a coliseum kind of thing that looked a little bit Mad Max. It looked a little bit Avatar. And the circular risers, and
Oh,
then
okay.
there's a 50-foot canvas, and there are 5 guys painting on the 5 master
Is this like
abstract
in
painters.
Costa Rica or something?
Similar, that
Like,
one's in Vision. This one's is
yeah.
in Northern California.
Okay.
And you have people sitting in the bleachers literally watching paint dry.
Wow.
Just sitting there watching a 50-foot canvas get painted.
That sounds really wonderful.
It's
Yeah,
really,
I
really
like
nice.
I think endurance projects too are really like part of the psychedelic experience for people who haven't engaged in like indigenous ceremony or whatever. Like there's things people do that push the limits of like physical stuff, and art will do that, where like you have to stay up 2 nights in a row dancing, or the challenge is to complete the giant painting. I like that. I like ordeals.
Yeah.
I'm ready for an ordeal, definitely. Like every now and then my friend and I bury me and leave me with my head sticking out for like 2 days and pretend I died and then come get me, like, and some days I'm just like, I need that so badly. And like, maybe someday we'll have things like Uber or like people you can just call to help put you through some kind of
Sure.
ordeal, drive you to the random place where you might find your treasure somewhere. Or, yeah.
You want to come watch the baby for a week?
That would be probably the ordeal that would just put me through it. Yeah. It's called parenthood. Yeah.
Parenthood's quite an ordeal.
Yep.
Well, because also, when nobody's
That's
sleeping.
probably it. It's probably because I'm a childless 52-year-old. Yeah.
Well, I know that other ordeals are available.
Yeah.
And, I'm not trying to preference one over the other. I'm not trying to be a parent exceptionalist.
Oh gosh, but you nailed it though. Like the ordeal of parenthood is putting people through stuff right now like that. I can't even imagine the honing of the soul and the patience it must be taking for parents right now. I would love to babysit. Bring your babies over. That's the only way I'm going to give anybody my address. It's like if you bring a baby.
Right on. But then you also have to deal with your partner, and both of you are going through the ordeal.
Yeah.
And so that both of you become an ordeal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fun.
Yeah. No, it's been really it's wild to think that the mirroring that I've gotten for an entire year has been mostly between my partner and I. It's like this sense of dissolving of oneself as an individual is very humbling, because like I don't know the difference between myself and her, because to make things work there's a kind of surrender of one's own will that is exaggerated tenfold in the pandemic, for me at least. Yeah I don't even know like what I want to do on my own right now. That's another part of the crazy thing. I'm like, as an individual, what new hobby would I want to develop? It's like, oh, what would serve the household?
Right.
Yeah
I mean, it is hard these days to I read this, I didn't make this up. Nobody really has hobbies anymore. They just have side gigs.
Yeah.
They just have something else that they do that is sort of fun, that they then sell on Etsy or something.
Yes. Yeah, that is something so important to remember, to just, like, what is a freaking hobby? Like, what is the most obscure, unsellable thing that would make me really happy? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I'm so self-entertaining. I realize that I have a lot more synergetic experience than I have allowed myself to remember. Like, what do you call it? Like, I'll just touch my shoulder and I'll immediately see kind of a movie or a sense of smells and colors. I think I looked it up, that it's somatic, what do you call it? Synesthesia. Somatic synesthesia is like a thing, and I didn't know that it was. And And I asked Beth, I'm like, does everybody see colors and smells when they tune into a part of their body? And she was like, no, I don't. They say that synesthesia is actually like 7 to 10% of the population. Is that true? I don't think so. I think we're all probably wired that way. And some people are just more aware of it than others. And I was also told to not use my imagination too much as a kid. And
Right.
that I also was wondering if that's why we are embracing psychedelics so much, is that culturally, a lot of us have been trained out of having a really, really rich imaginal world.
Or yeah, really, really direct experience of our own body and life, right? It's
Yeah.
like Huxley said he noticed that the mind acts often like a reducing valve.
Mm-hmm.
We've been taught to reduce the
Yeah.
information to that which serves capitalism.
Yeah. Yeah. And so my mind is being blown with the amount of how much I realize I've repressed both my dream world and my synesthesia world. And I'm like, wait, where did I learn that? And I think it does, because it has no use. Like the imagination, unless you're creating a product out of it, and I've been talking about making art the whole time. So I'm definitely guilty of this thing of like, it's valuable because you can make something.
You have a
Whereas
ukulele?
lately, no, that might be a necessary thing in the psychedelic realm, right? Like a ukulele.
Well, it's there's no monetary thing. There's like no way that I can monetize the ukulele, and it's easy to play and it doesn't take up a lot of space.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Also painting rocks and putting them like doing stuff like, just painting stuff and hiding it everywhere. We do a lot of that in the mining town near where I live.
right.
Leave
I think
little
I was
gifts for
there.
people.
There's
Yeah.
that spooky little mining town with like the
Yeah.
one store where the guy sells like rocks and old pieces of rusty metal.
Yep. Yep. We've got definitely a lot of that going on. But there's stories out, like one of the LSD heads who recently passed was telling me a story about creating ley lines through these stones that he would put with paintings of tarot cards on them. And
Oh wow.
they told an entire story. And when I'm on LSD, I can actually see these prayers that these old hippies have made in this town. I can see what they saw and what they created. And so it's like a collective hallucination about people who died or aren't necessarily with me while I'm tripping.
Mm-hmm.
That's something to experience. And it's really cool to be in a place where a lot of people have tripped and to see like a thing built.
Right. Well, they did that in Nepal. There's a town in Nepal called Bhaktapur where they sort of created their own grid. They made, instead of just putting rocks there, well, it's basically rocks. They built temples and they built a grid of temples that are, aligned with the directions and things of that nature. And then they just go and worship at them. And so they are just kind of charging this grid in the middle of the valley.
Mm-hmm. I think that's part
as
of
a community.
that ethical thing. Yeah, like you're creating your spiritual. Yeah, I love that.
And it's really
That's
nice
what
when
I'm
you can
talking
get
about building spaces for ourselves, imaginary.
Right. I mean, I could talk to you all day, but usually these podcasts go about this long.
This sounds really like a good place to start, considering I seem to be going in and out.
Yes, indeed.
I am here.
So very cool. So I appreciate you being here with us. It's always super fun for me to be able to talk to you. I really, really enjoy it. And I don't know if you get to come back a little, for a moment to say goodbye, but it looks like you're still cutting out and things like that.
Yeah.
So everybody, this has been Instrumental Breakthroughs. I'm really grateful that you came to listen. And, again, big thanks. Visit us at tamintegration.com. You can support us at patreon.com/tamintegration. You can also support Deadheadland at patreon.com/deadheadland. And for all of your live stream needs, you can check out livestreamremote.com. And of course, many, many thanks to Bett Williams. You can look her up wherever fine books are sold. And you can join her caravan across the Southwest when you help her create it.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Daniel.
Yes, thank you.